The rescue squad rushed to the home of an elderly couple after reports of a possible heart attack. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, it was too late. The man had passed away. As they comforted the grieving widow, one of the rescuers noticed the bed was in complete disarray. Curious, he gently asked what symptoms the man had experienced and if anything might have triggered the heart attack. The elderly woman sighed and said, "Well, we were in bed making love, and he started moaning, groaning, thrashing around, panting and sweating." She paused for a moment before shaking her head. "I thought he was coming, but I guess he was going." One day, a woman walks into a dentist's office and asks how much it will cost to extract wisdom teeth. $80, the dentist says. "That's a ridiculous amount," the woman says. "Isn't there a cheaper way?" "Well," the dentist says, "if you don't use an anesthetic, I can knock the price down to $60. "That's still too expensive," replies the woman. "Okay," says the dentist. "If I save on anesthesia and simply rip the teeth out with a pair of pliers, I can knock the price down to $20. "Nope," moans the woman. "It's still too much." "Well," says the dentist, scratching his head, "if I let one of my students do it, I suppose I can knock the price down to $10. "Marvelous," says the woman. "May I book my mother-in-law for next Tuesday, please?" It was pouring rain, and a large puddle had gathered outside an Irish pub. An old man stood by the puddle, holding a stick with a string dangling into the water, gently jiggling it up and down. A passing gentleman, curious and slightly amused, stopped to ask, "What are you doing?" "Fishing," the old man replied with a straight face. The gentleman chuckled to himself, thinking, "Poor old chap, he's lost it." Feeling a pang of pity, he invited the old man inside for a drink. As they sat in the warm pub, sipping their whiskey, the gentleman decided to humor him. "So," he asked with a smirk, "how many have you caught today?" The old man took a sip of his drink, smiled slyly and said, "You're the 8th. Just a week into marriage, a woman rushes to the doctor with a very personal issue. Woman tells her plastic surgeon that she wants her vaginal lips reduced in size because they were too loose and floppy. Out of embarrassment, she insisted that the surgery be kept secret, and the surgeon agreed. Awakening from the anesthesia after the surgery, she found 3 roses carefully placed beside her on the bed. Outraged, she immediately calls in the doctor. "I thought I asked you not to tell anyone about my operation." The surgeon told her he had carried out her wish for confidentiality and that the first rose was from him. "I felt sad because you went through this all by yourself. The second rose is from my nurse. She assisted me in the surgery and empathized because she had the same procedure done some time ago." "And what about the third rose?" she asked. "That's from a man upstairs in the burn unit. He wanted to thank you for his new ears." One day, a policeman is strolling down the street when he notices a tiny boy standing in front of a house, desperately trying to reach the doorbell. The boy, however, is too small, and the doorbell is just out of his grasp. The policeman watches for a moment, amused, before walking over. Gently placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, he leans forward and rings the doorbell for him with a quick press. Squatting down to the boy's level, the policeman grins and asks, "So, what do we do now, little guy?" The boy looks up with a mischievous smile and replies, "Now we run." An old biker stumbles into a bar, clearly drunk, and plops down on a stool with a loud belch. "Give me a drink," he slurs at the bartender. The bartender, staying polite, replies, "Sir, I think you've had enough for the night. I can't serve you, but I can call you a cab." The biker blinks in surprise, mutters something under his breath, and wobbles out the front door. A few minutes later, the same biker staggers in through the side door. He sways up to the bar and demands another drink. The bartender, now a bit more firm, says, "Sir, as I said before, I can't serve you. Let me call you a cab." The biker glares, grumbles louder this time, and stumbles out the side door. Not 5 minutes pass before the biker comes stumbling in through the back door, determined as ever. "All right, bartender," he says, slamming a hand on the counter. "Just pour me a drink already." The bartender sighs and says, "Sir, this is the third time. You're drunk, and I've told you I can't serve you. Either let me call you a cab, or I'll have to involve the police." The biker stares at him, slack-jawed, then throws his hands in the air and cries, "How many bars do you work at, man?" A man who was very proud of having 6 children started calling his wife Mother of 6 to show off his achievement. Despite her protests, he continued with it. One evening, they went to a party, and as the night wore on, he decided it was time to leave. He wanted to check if his wife was ready, so he loudly asked, "Shall we go home, Mother of 6? In response, his wife, a bit frustrated by his constant boasting, shot back, "Whenever you're ready, Father of 4. 4 women were relaxing in a sauna, each wrapped modestly in a towel. 2 were younger, 1 was middle-aged, and the last was a feisty senior citizen. Suddenly, a soft beeping sound filled the air. One of the younger women tapped her forearm, silencing it. The others looked at her, intrigued. "Oh," she explained, "that's my pager. I had a microchip implanted under my skin." Not long after, a melodic ringtone played. The second young woman casually raised her hand to her ear and started talking. When she finished, she smiled at their curious expressions. "That was my phone," she said. "It's integrated into a microchip in my hand." The middle-aged woman chuckled nervously, glancing at her towel as if it could magically grant her a high-tech upgrade. But before she could speak, the senior citizen got up and left the sauna. Moments later, she returned confidently, with a piece of toilet paper trailing conspicuously from her behind. The other 3 stared in stunned silence, eyebrows raised in confusion. Without missing a beat, the older woman smirked and said, "Well, would you look at that? I'm receiving a fax." A market researcher for the Vaseline company knocked on a door and was greeted by a frazzled young mother with 3 little kids running wild around her. "I'm conducting a survey about Vaseline," he said. "Do you use the product?" "Absolutely," she replied. "My husband and I use it all the time." Curious, the researcher asked, "If you don't mind me asking, what do you use it for?" "We use it when we make love," she answered, matter-of-factly. The researcher blinked, surprised. "Wow, most people give me some nonsense about using it on a squeaky door or a rusty bike chain. But let's be honest, I know what it's really used for. I appreciate your honesty, since you've been so open. Can you tell me exactly how you use it?" The woman smiled and said, "Oh, that's easy. We put it on the doorknob. Keeps the kids out." A couple was watching a Discovery Channel special about an African bush tribe, where the men all had man measuring 24 inches. According to the show, when boys reached a certain age, they tied a string around their shaft, attaching a weight to the other end. Over time, the weight stretched it to an impressive 24 inches. Later that night, as the husband stepped out of the shower, His wife glanced down and playfully suggested, "How about we try that African string and weight technique?" Intrigued, the husband agreed. They tied a string, attached a small weight, and waited for nature to take its course. A few days later, the wife checked in. "So how's our little tribal experiment going?" "Well," the husband said, "we're about halfway there." "Wow, you've grown to 12 inches, she asked excitedly. "No, it's turned black." In a cozy little beauty parlor, where the scent of hairspray mingles with freshly brewed coffee, 3 women are deep in conversation. As usual, the chatter goes beyond hairdos and nail polish. It's a lively exchange about life, love, and, of course, husbands. At first, the atmosphere is light-hearted, filled with laughter and knowing nods. But soon, the conversation takes a more serious turn, dipping into a topic all too familiar: suspicion and mistrust in marriage. The first woman lets out a deep sigh, her frustration evident. "Last night, my husband said he was going to the office," she confesses. "But when I called, guess what? He wasn't there." She shakes her head, her voice laced with disappointment. The other 2 women lean in, nodding in understanding. The second woman doesn't hesitate to chime in. "Oh, I know exactly how you feel," she says, rolling her eyes. "Mine told me he was heading to his brother's place, so, naturally, I called to check." She pauses for dramatic effect. "And you know what? He wasn't there either." Their shared frustration knits them even closer, their voices rising as they exchange tales of elusive husbands and suspicious alibis. Then, the third woman, who has been listening quietly, suddenly speaks up. With a serene smile, she declares, "I always know exactly where my husband is." The other 2 women freeze. They stare at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "That's impossible," one of them exclaims. "How can you be so sure?" The third woman takes a sip of her coffee, sets the cup down gently, and, with the same calm expression, delivers the punchline: "I'm a widow." A guy comes home late one night, and his wife is waiting for him at the door, arms crossed. "Where have you been?" she demands. "I was out getting a tattoo," he replies. Her eyes narrow. "A tattoo? What kind of tattoo?" "I got a $100 bill on my She stares at him, dumbfounded. "A $100 bill? On your What were you thinking?" He grins and says, "Well, for 3 reasons. 1, I like to watch my money grow. 2, every now and then I enjoy playing with my money. And 3, this way, instead of going shopping, you can stay home and blow $100. An old blind Marine accidentally stumbles into an all-girl biker bar, completely unaware of his surroundings. After feeling his way to the bar, he takes a seat and orders a shot of Jack Daniels. As he settles in, he suddenly yells out, "Hey, anyone here want to hear a blonde joke?" The room goes dead silent. From beside him, a deep, authoritative voice calmly responds, "Before you go any further, I think you should know a few things." The voice continues. 1. The bartender is a blonde woman with a baseball bat. 2. The bouncer is also a blonde woman. 3. I'm a blonde, 6 foot tall, 175-pound black belt in karate. 4. The woman sitting next to me is a blonde professional weightlifter. 5. And the lady on your other side is a blonde professional wrestler. The room stays silent as the Marine pauses to process what he just heard. After a moment, he chuckles softly and says, "You know what? Forget it. I don't feel like explaining the joke 5 times." A girl potato and a boy potato were smitten with each other, and soon enough they tied the knot. Not long after, they welcomed a little sweet potato into their lives and lovingly named her Yam. As Yam grew up, her parents wanted only the best for her. When the time came, they sat her down to discuss the facts of life. "Yam," they said, "be careful out there. Don't go getting half-baked and end up mashed. We don't want you turning into a hot potato with a bad reputation, or worse, winding up with a bunch of tater tots to take care of." Yam rolled her eyes, but assured them, "Relax, Mom and Dad. No spud is going to sweet-talk me into the sack and turn me into a rotten potato. But I'm not staying home to be a couch potato either. I stay active and make sure I'm not as skinny as my shoestring cousins." When Yam decided to travel to Europe, Mr. and Mrs. Potato were nervous. They warned her, "Watch out for those hard-boiled Irish potatoes and those greasy French fries, and steer clear of those high-class Yukon Golds. They're flashy but trouble. Oh, and don't even think about hanging around with those ruffians who ride around in Frito-Lay trucks." To ensure Yam's bright future, they sent her to Idaho PU, Potato University. "With a degree," they said proudly, "you'll really be in the chips." But one fateful day, Yam returned home with big news. "Mom, Dad," she said excitedly, "I'm getting married." "Who's the lucky spud?" they asked. With a dreamy smile, Yam replied, "Tom Brokaw." Mr. and Mrs. Potato gasped in horror. "Tom Brokaw? You can't marry him." "Why not?" Yam asked, confused. With a heavy sigh, they said, "Because Yam? He's just a commentator." A couple in their 40s who loved their children dearly were in their youngest son, who was only 10 years old. As they chatted before bed, they asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. "Son, I want 5 wives." "Mom, 5 wives? And what will each one do?" "Son, well, one will cook, one will sing, one will bathe me." "Mom, and one will put you to sleep?" "Son, no, Mom, I'll still sleep with you." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, God bless you, son." "Mom, but who will take care of your wives then?" "Son, they'll sleep with Daddy." The father's eyes filled with tears. "God bless you, son." The husband's clever solution: the wife is packing her clothes. Husband, "And where do you think you're going?" Wife, "I'm moving to my mother." The husband starts packing too. Wife, "And where do you think you're going?" Husband, "I'm moving to my mother too." Wife, "And what about the kids?" Husband, "Well, if you're going to your mother and I'm going to mine, I guess the kids should go to their mother." The doctor and his wife, Marie, were playing golf at the club when she stepped up to the tee and crushed a 300-yard drive straight down the fairway. "Wow!" the doctor exclaimed. "I've never seen you play this well before." Marie smiled and said, "I took lessons. A few days later, they were on the tennis court for mixed doubles." Marie's serves were powerful, her volleys unstoppable. She didn't miss a single point. "Unbelievable," the doctor said. "I've never seen you hit like that before." Marie shrugged. "I took lessons." That weekend, they enjoyed a quiet dinner at home. Marie brought out plates of perfectly cooked beef Wellington, garnished to perfection. "Wow," the doctor marveled. "I've never seen you cook like this before." Marie smiled again. "I took lessons." Later that night, she gave him that look, and they headed upstairs. 30 minutes later, the doctor lay back, gasping. "Wow, that was incredible, amazing, so unbelievably hot." Then he rolled over, sighed, and said, "I want a divorce." In a bustling Chicago hospital, a gentleman found himself in an all-too-familiar predicament. The men's restroom was perpetually occupied. After several futile attempts, a sharp-eyed nurse took pity on him. "Sir," she offered, "you're welcome to use the ladies' room, but you must promise not to touch the buttons on the wall." With a hurried nod, he agreed and slipped inside. Relieved yet curious, he settled onto the seat and immediately spotted the forbidden panel. 4 enigmatic buttons labelled WW, Washington, PP, and a glaring red one marked ATR. Who'd even notice? He rationalised, temptation overriding caution. He pressed WW. Instantly, a soothing spray of warm water cascaded over his nether regions. Positively luxurious, he marvelled, comparing it to the utilitarian men's facilities. Emboldened, he tapped WA. A gust of warm air swirled around him, leaving his skin delicately dried. Next, PP summoned a plush powder puff that dabbed his skin with a whisper of floral fragrance. This isn't a restroom, it's a spa. Drunk on indulgence, he eyed the crimson ATR button. This must be the grand finale. He slammed it eagerly. His eyes fluttered open to the sterile glow of a hospital room. A nurse loomed over him, unamused. What happened? He stammered, memories flooding back. The last thing I recall was the ATR button. She arched a brow. Automatic remover. Her tone was drier than the WA setting. Your man is under the pillow. The room spun faster than the powder puff. Some buttons, it seemed, were better left to the experts. After a long and exhausting day, a young woman finally settled into her seat on the train, hoping for a peaceful ride home. She closed her eyes, ready to drift into some much-needed rest. But her hopes were quickly dashed by the man sitting next to her, who whipped out his phone and began speaking loudly enough for the entire train car to hear. "Hi, sweetheart. It's John. I'm on the train," he announced. "Yes, I know it's 6:30, not 4:30, but I had a long meeting." "No, honey, I wasn't with Kathy from accounts. I was with the boss, I swear. You're the only one in my life." "Yes, I'm sure, dear." For a solid 15 minutes, the conversation dragged on, his voice dominating the space and testing the patience of everyone around him. Finally, the young woman had enough. She leaned in close to him, then spoke loudly into his phone. "John, darling, hang up and come back to bed already." The train car erupted into laughter, and John's face turned bright red. He hung up instantly, and from that day on, John never made another loud phone call in public.